Welcome into Esports Weekly, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Ryan Bailey. I'll be your host as per usual. And you picked a good day to tune in because this is a big week for the SPL. Bye week looming, and a lot of teams have games this week that need to start getting the ball rolling. We'll see SSG versus Obey, who's going to take the crown for what might be 9th place right now in the SPL after the way LG has looked as of late. Who can get the ball rolling for them and try and get up towards the top end. And then some big games for SK Gaming as well as they try and right the ship after losing to the Pittsburgh Knights last week. But I want to start overall and talk about the big story of last week, which is, of course, Luminosity. How could we start anywhere else? We talked so much about this team's roster changes. Every roster change we talked about, this is going to make a difference, but LG's got a new look. We'll see if it actually makes a difference. And boy, howdy, did it make a difference. I mean, look, this team won some games in Phase 1. But let's be honest with one another. They weren't going to win those sets. I mean, they would win game 1 of those sets and then get absolutely demolished the next 3. And that was kind of the MO for LG for a lot of the season. Last week, though, not the case whatsoever. In fact, they really should have gone 2-0 in my mind. They had a lot of really, really good plays. To go 1-1 on the week, is a huge win for a team that hadn't won a set in all of Phase 1. But boy, did that team make a lot of improvements. Snoopy immediately looked pretty comfortable in mid. I thought Ionic looked very good in support. Lasbro looks completely revitalized in the jungle. Joshi continued to play well. And who was that new solo laner they had? This Zalia kid? There's no way it's the same guy that was playing for them in Phase 1 because that Zalia wasn't doing a whole lot. This Zalia, on the other hand, was picking chalk and making it look like a legitimate SPL level selection against the best of the best. This is a team that you do have to watch out for. Now, do I think LG is going to win Worlds? Probably not. I mean, they just have a lot of work to do. But could they win Worlds? Yes, it's physically possible for them to hoist the trophy at the end of the year. And I would have said it is literally impossible for old LG to win Worlds. So in the world of the SPL, really in the world of competitive sports and esports, I think that we don't zoom out enough. I don't think we look at the binary situation. At any level of sport, the highest level, I should say, anytime you're talking about a traditional sport or an esport, shouldn't the bare bones question be, is this team capable of winning the championship? Yes or no? We can talk percentages later on. We can talk about, whether or not they're favored, or maybe they've got injuries, or players aren't there, whatever it is. All of that is details. At the end of the day, it's binary. Can you win the championship? Yes or no? Those are the only things that matter at the top end. And before, the answer was clearly no for LG. Now, it might be a yes. And that's crazy to think about in comparison to where they were. And that's what when I'm talking about teams like Space Station Gaming, where are we on that binary scale? Can they win Worlds with this current draft, or this current composition, I should say? I don't know. That's what I think we're going to find out this week. I mean, if they're losing to Obey Alliance, it's not looking good for them. Obey Alliance made some changes. Can they win Worlds with this current structure? I don't know. We will learn something from them this week. Whoever loses between Space Station and Obey, it's going to be a tough second phase. I think just mentally that takes you out of it a lot of the way. And the mental game part of esports as a whole, really, really underrated, and I think does end up playing a huge factor for a lot of these teams. On the top end, 1 through 6, 1 through 7, SK Gaming being the 7th best team. Could SK Gaming win Worlds? Yeah. I don't think there's a whole lot of question about whether or not they are capable of getting hot at the right time. They did it last year and finished top 4. Just a matter of proving it and getting consistent. And that's what we're going to talk about with SK later on in the day, no doubt about that. But watch out for LG because they're coming in hot right now, no doubt about that. If you missed last week's games, here's the schedule for it. You missed a bunch of good ones. Renegades defended their crown from the Midseason Invitational. They took down Splice 3-1. LG won a banger of a 5-game set up against United. LG then lost to Dignitas, but pretty close in that 3-1 loss. And then Pittsburgh Knights dispatched SK Gaming 3-1, which brings us to our current standings. LG still in 10th as of right now, because they have that extra game in hand, but make no bones, I don't think they are the 10th best team in the SPL any longer. Team Rival continues to be the undisputed number 1 team in the SPL right now, sitting at just 1 loss. And remember, that was week 2, I want to say, of Phase 1 that they took that loss to Dignitas. It's been a minute since Rival lost a regular season SPL game. Don't talk about mid-season invitational or Lance. Like we don't got to bring that up. We're talking regular season here. Rival 10-1. They're still really good. Make sure you remember that because they might be already qualified for Worlds at this point. And they aren't too far off from locking up that number 1 seed, which is a couple more victories, which is crazy to think about. We're only, this is going to be week 4 going into the SPL next week, and then the bye week. So you've got not that much time to catch up to Rival if you are Dignitas or Splice or any of those other top-end teams. Renegades still not where they want to be in the standings overall, I'd imagine, but I don't think they care that much. I mean, seeding certainly important, but it's the Renegades. They're playing pretty well right now. I'm also a little bit concerned about the Pittsburgh Knights. We keep saying they're gonna turn that corner, and I think they looked great against SK Gaming, but I'm excited to see how they do against Splice and Dignitas and Rival and Renegades and these teams that have done better throughout the year up until this point. You've got Rival at 1, and then Dignitas, PK, and E United are the next 3 teams. E United just lost to the 10th seed, even though LG is looking a lot better. The middle of the pack right now seems a little bit scattered all over the place. And where do we don't know exactly where Splice is going to end up with Solo Patrol now in the solo lane. We don't know exactly where Renegades are going to end up with a regular season play. I mean, there's a lot to be determined, I think, still in these standings. Every time I look at the standings, E United in 4th, I'm like, really? But they are. They're right there for now, though they've certainly got some things that they need to work on after that loss to Luminosity. Rival is the team to beat right now in the SPL, and there's no doubt about that in my mind. As I mentioned, we've got a lot in today's show. We're going to be going over a lot of these teams on the schedule because we have a bunch of games this week in the SPL, but we had a bunch last week as well, and that means we got a bunch of top 5 plays, and this might be, and I say this a lot, but this might be the best 5 from top to bottom we've had all year long. Incredible plays last week. We'll start with number 5. It's a lovely little leap from Lasbra over the blue buff wall. This wins an engagement for LG right away. A 3-man Pele knockup at the late game. Insta-kills Heroine. Lasbra was playing lights out that day against Dignitas. Really fun set to watch if you missed it. That was, of course, a Dignitas victory in the end, however. Number 4, we've got Funballer with a cheeky little play, and I say cheeky because it's Kieran, and he's a big fan of those cheeky little plays. Aurora's trying to get this ult in here, and Funballer goes, yeah, I don't really feel like getting hit by that. Why don't you just go ahead and get that out of here? By the way, that's a fun ball that Hercules was throwing, but Funballer was the only fun ball in that team fight. You're welcome for that one. Number 3, Joshy had quite a week as well. LG showing up twice on our top 5 plays. This triple for Joshy, clocking in at number 3. Benji really wishes he wasn't there anymore, but Joshy doesn't let him off the hook. Doesn't miss an auto on Benji as he's retreating, and then eventually ends up cleaning up Ice Ice Baby as well. This fight, certainly one that Joshy made a lot of plays in for the triple kill. Number 2 is E United on the other side. We had LG just beating on E United a little bit. Now it's E United beating on LG. Hey, is Benji, guys, I just don't want to really go out on a limb here, but I'm pretty sure Benji's good. So let's just assume I'm right there. And then I'm pretty sure Benji playing King Arthur is a good combo. We tried to do the math on the lower third, but I don't know if this equation is quite right. But this quadra kill for Benji seemed good to me. I don't know. Well, let me know if you agree. I think it's pretty solid. King Arthur does stuff, and Benji does that stuff pretty well, so seems pretty solid to me. Number 1 on the week, however, in a very close game between the Pittsburgh Knights and SK Gaming, adapting ends the closeness of this one. This ultimate was absolutely bonkers. A 4-man Sonic Boom right through the middle of this team fight. Nearly hit Sam for Soccer as well, by the way. Insta-kills Paul. Vote's able to get it going from the distance to kill Zapman as well. Insta-killing both carries in a 30-minute team fight around fire. Pretty good way to win the game. And it's not like it was super perfect from his perspective. You can tell how he just kind of pops around the corner and sees, oh yeah, maybe I should just let it rip here. Vote was on the run at the beginning of this play because Sam for Soccer engaged on him. And he turns around and watches the art unfold in front of him. Great shots from Vote. That little target swap to Zapman at the very end, very impressive. PK, that's what we want to see, baby. Let's keep that ball rolling. That was an impressive play number 1 for last week's SPL. But like I said, those were probably the 5 best plays top to bottom that we've had in the SPL so far. Turns out that when these players get to play the whole time and play against each other on LAN, they keep getting better, and it keeps getting better games. Here's our schedule for this week. Obey Alliance kicks us off on Thursday up against SSG, then Luminosity takes on SK Gaming. LG will have another test to kick off Friday up against the Renegades, and Splice Arrival should be a real barn burner. Great measuring stick for this new Splice roster and seeing how Solo Patrol stacks up against Fine OK. Mr. Fonzo has been having a nice workout against most solo laners in the SPL so far. We'll see if Solo Patrol is able to step up and handle that matchup. So stay tuned here on Esports Weekly. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Big week for Obey Alliance. They face off against Space Station in what feels like a must-win from two bottom-end teams. We had a chance to sit down and talk to Obey solo laner Ducky about this week's games.
By the one, the only Duckster, as Finch calls you, or has told me to call you today, from Team Obey. Obey, your new roster, we're trifecta before at the start of the year. First off, Ducky, first of all, how has moving to America been for you? What's the experience been like?
It's been nice. There's a lot of ramen here, which we don't really have back home, which is lovely. It's great being in the house with everyone, even though Kasia sometimes attacks everyone by kicking the back of their chairs. And when I say kick, I mean like he goes all out. Karate
does he spot a kick because you're not doing very well, or is it like is it a motivational tool? Is it something you're not realizing?
No, it's like Gremlins. Like after 10 p.m.,
yeah,
he just goes wild in the house.
Don't feed him then. Do you give him water? Is that what it is?
No, he just orders takeaway.
Oh.
Oh, he's looking angry.
He gets his energy going, right? And that's the way it's going to be. So, start of the year, you joined this Obey team, was trifecta at the time. How did it feel for you? Because that roster was very North America. Like, you were one of the only EU boys joining this roster for the most part. How did that feel coming into that? Were you worried at all?
No, I felt like I know a lot of people in the Smite community because, like, I want to say it's kind of like a family, almost, because everyone knows each other somewhat. So it wasn't too scary going in, because I already had an idea of what everyone was like. And I'd met Kasia before as well, so I don't know.
How did you feel about the changes, though, with all the games being played live? You were in the studio every single week. Like, was that a big difference for you at all? Like, obviously, everyone playing at home in previous seasons. This one live in the studio, did it have a real difference in terms of, like, you know, expectation for the league?
I don't know. I felt like it was more fun, and it was less scary for me, because at home, like in one of my old SK games, we had a thunderstorm, and my power went out on like our first game of our season. So we couldn't play that out, so we had to DQ. But here, you know, everything goes well.
Yep.
So, I don't know. It's been a lot of fun playing live.
All right, cool. So, with the start of the year so far as well for Trifecta, it wasn't the greatest performance as a team overall. You had some roster changes as well. Walk me through a little bit, like, what happened with you guys, like, what ended up happening, why you ended up making roster changes.
I don't know. We felt like when we got into game, like, first games usually they either went well, or we kind of got, you know...
Rolled over,
yeah, would be the kind way to put it. And then second game, we usually brought it back. And then, I don't know, we just never really pulled through. And we felt like we needed a change, because it obviously wasn't going too great. So we got Moswell in for Lasbro on LG. He's doing well in jungle. And then we got Mineral in for Eonic, who's also now in LG. But I felt like changes were needed. And hopefully it'll go better.
During the offseason, how's the chemistry been with you, the team? And obviously, with new members coming in, you've had to probably make adjustments to their styles and things. Do you think things have gone well so far in terms of preparation?
Yeah, I think everyone meshes fairly well. And Mineral played with Wowie back in the day, I think. I'm not too sure. Kind of guessing.
He did.
He did? Okay, yeah. Good. And then...
So you all know each other, but you don't all communicate and follow each other, right?
No, not at all. But I know they're friends inside and outside the game, and then we also played with Moswell as well, so there's chemistry there. So it's just me and we can, kind of meshing in with them.
Okay, cool. So with the second phase now coming up, obviously you've already started playing a couple of games, getting warmed up. How's it gone for you so far in the second phase? What's been your personal focus, I would say, of what you're trying to do in the league?
Ban Arthur.
Is you just having an issue playing Arthur, or dealing?
No, it's like the first split. I just kept playing against him. Kind of got rolled over again. So I've been trying to play more gods, try and expand that pool and deal with the character. I know he got nerfed a fair bit, but still a bit of a pain. And he's not picked as highly anymore. But no, mainly expanding the god pool.
And that's been your major focus, just expanding a little bit more gods, a bit more flexibility for the most part. Have you noticed any changes in the solo lane at all, or is things kind of continued from last season into this to an extent?
No, it's kind of different because people were initially playing like bully characters like Arthur. Osiris was great because of his mitigations, and then Kama. But right now it's more along the lines of farm up for later on. So Yorm, Zhong are really good. You saw Amma and Vimana picked a lot. So it's mainly for that late game to deal with the carries and the mid, I want to say, because the carries get so much farm.
Yeah, sure.
Unless they put the mid laner over there, but it's mainly just farm up, deal with them.
Okay. We'll turn a little bit more of the attention towards this year again, but I want to take a quick look back. Last year, you were on the infamous SK team that didn't do the greatest that you would have liked to overall. How hard is it to try and bounce back from consistent losses? And to be fair, this year you kind of started off that way as well with this team. Like, did you think you were going to end up in the same situation again this year, or did you always have hope it was going to get better?
I mean, I always had hope. It was the same last year. Like, it was a group of great players, but we just never really pulled it through on game day, I feel like. Because scrims went well, but yeah, game day always went downhill. But I feel like... What was it? What was the question?
Question really was like, have you seen the same sort of thing happening with this Obey roster, or have you still got hope that you're going to do a lot better in the second half of the year?
Oh no, I'm hoping we're going to get a few wins this year or this split. I feel like we can take games off the majority of the teams. The high end teams, I still think we can, like for sure, but we need to put the work in.
Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. Thanks so much to Ducky for sitting down with Hinduman, the Obey correspondent, and talking about his thoughts about this season. But we've got Tom Battinger, the SSG correspondent, joining us here. This is a big matchup, Tom. Obey versus SSG. With Luminosity looking better, this is you cannot afford to drop the 10th. And I feel like this, in the minds of the fans, if SSG lose this, I don't know how you say they're anything but the 10th best team right now.
I agree. Usually it's my job here to expand on that, but frankly, I just agree, right? I just agree.
It's tough. It's tough days for the Space Station boys, and this is a set where you can turn it around. They have won games like this, even this year where they have struggled. Oh, yeah. So how are they feeling going into a set that I think for such a low stakes in the grand scheme of things set might end up putting a lot of pressure on them?
The guys right now are very happy that they've had such a long break. That's really what they're leaning on. It's been a long time since SSG actually hit the battlefield, and when it comes down to it, talking to the guys, they were like, that's the biggest boon we have. We've been able to do all this practice, all this learning. Now it's time to put up or shut up. But the guys are very happy that they've been able to spend this time working, and that's really over and over again. That's all they really got was just we've had a whole bunch of time to work on our craft, and usually that bodes well.
And usually it does. It's just a matter of if they can figure out this sort of meta. And I do think that this meta can help this team. I mean, Barra maybe didn't look quite as comfortable on gods like Morgan and Jonqui before. Now he's had some time to theoretically get a little bit more used to them. And Barra's played pretty well this year as an individual. Getting him all the farm, that's kind of what the meta's about, might be a good sign for this team.
I agree. I definitely think that Barra and Nenu combined can really make some moves here. At the end of the day, I'm looking at Sino. I'm looking there. That's really what I need. I need to see World Champ MVP Sino. You signed a World Champion MVP Sino. That's what you did. I need to see that out the jungle.
Sino definitely has not lived up, I think, to a lot of those expectations.
I'll call a spade a spade. Sino has not been good enough for SSG. Sino has not been what was advertised for SSG, and that's a problem.
Do you think that is the way that he's been playing? Do you think that's the way that the team has been playing around him? What do you think has led to that?
I'm very confident. I'm very comfortable saying, what I see the issue is. As far as if it's Sino not working with the squad or the squad not working with Sino, that's a whole different story. I'm not privy to their comms. I'm not privy to their private conversations. So I can't go ahead and dish that out. But there needs to be a change of mindset. This team has to realize that Sino is one of the more powerful picks that they've gotten historically. He's a world's MVP. Something's not working. And this is one of the better players that took the stage last year, and he's not doing the things that you thought he would do. This is a moment we have to just change your approach, change your mindset, because whatever you're looking at the game now is not working. And for Space Station Gaming, again, to have so much time off, I think that's the perfect time to actually make that change. You can switch that. When you have 1 week off, 1 week on, 1 week off, 1 week on, you're sticking to your guns, and you're going with, listen, this is what has gotten us victories before. This is what's got us close before. We can't all out tear it down and build it up.
Sure.
With the amount of time that SSG has been sitting on the sidelines waiting for their next time, they can strip it down and build it up theoretically and have a whole different game plan.
I think that point is especially crucial when you realize that this is the only team that doesn't have all 5 members living here in Atlanta. They do have some guys who travel, so you know that they don't have that time around one another that a lot of these other teams do in order to work through those sorts of issues. You talk a lot about the changing the mindset. What mindset should they get to eventually? Not what they need to change to get there necessarily. That's a much more complicated question. But what is the mindset that you think will help turn them around in the end?
Powerful jungler. I see it, and I hate to bring it up, but Sino is very down on his role right now, and that's not what the team needs. This is a MOBA. It's a living game. Changes happen, and one of the things that come with a living game, patches happen. You see it all over the game. You see it all over different leagues. Take a look at Counter-Strike, Overwatch, Dota right now, the international. You've got to be able to adapt, and if you just sit on your hands and I don't mean to paint Sino as this ultimate complainer, but you got to channel that energy into just empowering yourself.
Sure.
The jungle's working for other teams, and that's got to change. The mindset has to be, our jungler is a strong player. We know what he can do. We have to make that happen, whatever that may be.
So up against Obey in particular, this is a team that has looked okay overall. I mean, they just made the change to Mineral. I do not think Mineral looked super impressive in his first debut. Do you think that's where SSG is going to try to attack them? Is that support role?
It's tough to say that. It's tough for your game plan to be attack the support. I think before level 5, absolutely. That's what you're going to do. That's good Smite. And that's what they should do. Again, it's less about how they attack Obey on their end and more about how they empower themselves. I need to see Sino on stage saying, can't give me Naja, can't give me Robin, can't give me that. Because if that doesn't happen and the teams can give him those options, then why do you make the move?
So let's see what the rest of the casters thought about their predictions. Split down the middle. Graham and Taco feeling like it's going to be an Obey victory. Totally Finch leading SSG. Tom, where are you leaning in this set?
I think this is going to be Obey. I do think this is Obey because these are the matches. Weekend lives for these matches. That's
Sure.
what he does.
Yeah, Weekend does love to step up in these big moments. Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Talking SSG. Luminosity looks like a completely different roster. We'll talk to Taco about how they're feeling after their big week debut right after this. Welcome back, everybody. We opened the show talking about how Luminosity has looked completely different than how they started off the year. I mean, 10th seed, didn't win a whole set. Last week, they nearly won 2 sets already. They won 1 and got close against Dignitas. Yeah, that Dignitas. Their 2 sets, by the way, against the 4th seed United and the 2nd seed Dignitas. How's that for a change of pace for a team that didn't win a set all last year or all last phase? So let's see what they're going to do this week. We've got Taco standing by quite literally here for Luminosity. Taco, I mean, look, this team made a lot of changes, and you can clearly tell in their gameplay.
It was a really big switch up, I think, and even coming into their first set, I'm going to take a second to apologize to you, man. I'm a little bit out of breath here, Chad.
Taco
It's just
had
I was
some,
overwhelmed looking at Luminosity
Sure.
and their Phase 2 results so far. And in all honesty, Aggro, they have done a phenomenal job already, being such a fresh roster, having these swaps come through. So I don't want to call it last minute, but
Sure.
it's pretty evident that it's not a decision that the team had a whole lot of time to make.
Sure.
But what they've been able to accomplish so far with what time they were given is definitely an incredible feat.
So they made some significant changes, but you can tell that they got there fairly quickly. I mean, a lot of people had higher expectations for this team right after the changes, but to beat the 4th seed and get really close to beating number 2 Dignitas, were you expecting them to be that good that quickly?
The Dignitas, I think, caught everybody a little bit by surprise. I think even the E United set win was still, it's still a little bit of embezzlement to the entire league. But when you really boil it all down, I mean, Eonic, Snoopy, they are pretty distinguished players, even though they've got a little bit more history in the charts than some would like to admit. I think the big storyline here is just the fact that they do have that pre-established synergy. So even though they were new components to the team, they weren't necessarily new players to the environment. And I think that really helped out a lot with just getting Lasbra a little bit more on the same page as well.
Yeah, I think Lasbra clearly looked more comfortable, and the big one for me is that Zalia looked phenomenal last week. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if he changed the diet or something like that, but he looks like a completely different player than Phase 1.
And a large part of that, I think, is just due to the fact that when you have a new team environment, it's very easy to be able to forget about the fact of what took place in that Phase 1. Because Phase 1
Sure.
was a really rough time for Luminosity. They had some Game 1 successes, but for the most part fell short of where they wanted to be. And with Zalia, I think one big thing that we saw for sure is that he was just making a lot more rotations. He just seemed a little bit more invigorated to want to try and participate with the team, and whether that's something that's credited to the team synergy just feeling a little bit better or the team environment just flowing together a little bit better, it's hard to say. But Zalia and Joshi, they just look revitalized right now, and they are definitely popping off.
Yeah, they really have. I mean, the whole core is looking a lot better for this team from the side lanes through the middle lane all the way over to Zalia and Solo. So now they've got Joshi as their ADC in the long lane that's getting all this farm, and he looked very good as well. As an ADC player yourself, what have you seen from Joshi that's really set him apart so far?
I think what's really helped out Joshi is having Snoopy in that mid lane position, because it's giving Joshi another member to kind of rely on for that follow-up damage. And Joshi also just seems like he's a little bit more confident here in Phase 2 than what we saw from him in Phase 1. And I think that's largely due to the fact that he was finding some solo kills from time to time in that duo lane, but also, this meta is just so open-ended, and while Joshi hasn't been in the SPL his entire Pro League career, at the same time, this is someone who has definitely hung around that right in between the gray area of being in that competitive level of success and being in that amateur level, which there's nothing wrong with being in the minor leagues or being in the Challenger Cup territory.
Sure.
It's a work in progress for sure, and I think that as long as Joshi continues to get this practice, we have still yet to really see him hit that skills cap ceiling.
But he's got a tough matchup in their first
Yes.
set in the week up against Zapman, who's looked very good so far this year, soloed a lot of his opposition. How do you think Joshi and the rest of LG match up against SK?
I think that this could actually be a really tough matchup for SK, because one thing that SK specializes in is that early game dominating factor, but it's going to be tough to do when dealing with the likes of Snoopy, Yannick, and Lasbra, because a lot of this centered around the core, and I think that these three are very familiar with what Neilmal likes to bring to the table. Neilmal just loves playing that harass style of support, so we
Sure.
could probably expect a little bit of favoritism from both of these teams towards that solo lane.
Yeah, that's something that you got to have to watch out for. Belair has been playing a lot of set and things like that as of late. Maybe Zalia needs to pull out something else, or Chalk theoretically has a pretty good matchup against Set, right? Big attack speed, slow, so Zalia's right where he wants to be, potentially, in that matchup. And then the Renegades right after that, so it's not like you get an easier one. SK a tough test, but Renegades looking like the best team right now, potentially, really right there with Rival. This is one where if Luminosity is able to get a game or two, I think all of us will be very impressed.
I would say the same thing for all of the sets involved. I think that what's really exciting to me, though, about LG is we've really only seen the tip of the iceberg with this team. There's
Sure.
still so much and a lot of, I don't want to say lack of information, because all of these players you can kind of look up a history for, but there isn't necessarily a whole lot of info out there for the competitive style of play that they like to run. We got a little bit of insight from from their first couple of sets, but those aren't necessarily guarantees. Keep in mind that this Luminosity team, at its core, I think, definitely likes to be a little bit more unconventional than some.
Sure. Yeah, are you at all concerned about this team? They came out of the gates really hot. Are you worried that they might be a little bit one-dimensional and that as teams get a little bit more time to review those VODs and look at what they've done, they won't improve at the rate that we're expecting?
Well, that's why I think Snoopy and Joshy are perfect for this team, because those two alone, I think, are going to make it easier for Lasbra and Ionic to kind of figure out what sort of god pulls they want to run. There's a lot of player flexibility here, and I just wouldn't really rule anything out for this team. So no, I can't say that would be one of the concerns.
I mean, if they beat SK on Thursday, they might have a real legitimate claim to the 7th best team in the SPL already.
And
SK's number
there's
7,
no
right?
insult in that at
No.
all. I say it all the time. We've never had a top 6 this close before.
Yep.
And it feels like teams 1 through 6 could be teams 1 through 3.
Yep, it's really been fun to watch so far this year. Taco, thank you very much for joining us and talking the new and improved Luminosity. We've got Tom Badger coming back right on the other side to go over SK's perspective on the up-and-coming LG match. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. This is going to be a big week for SK Gaming because they have been right on the precipice of that top 6, but now they've got a big challenger in Luminosity. To go over it, we've got SK correspondent Tom Badger joining us here. Tom, big week for your teams.
Oh, yeah.
Across the board, I would say, but this one, a little bit higher stakes.
Why do you say that, actually?
I mean,
I don't necessarily agree.
I mean, because this is kind of LG has clearly made leaps and bounds. Just from 1 week of play, they looked better in those 2 games than SSG or Obey has all year.
Sure.
Right? So they've already ascended to 8th in my mental standings. SK's number 7. And if they lose here, then that gets them one step away from that top end that they need to get to if they want to be considered a top team before Worlds.
I see that. Okay. All of a sudden it makes more sense, and you're kind of defending yourself from the bottom. SSG seems more of a defining moment. SK, it's still about the math. This team comes up, they play up, they go down, they play down. That's always kind of been what they're doing, you know? So when it comes down to what's going on with this team and how big this matchup is, it's a litmus test, sure, but honestly, I think that's more on LG side. SK, I've said this from minute 1 to now, this is the type of team that needs to look internally more than externally, and that doesn't really have anything to do with how they are on the standings necessarily. There are some teams, like if I were to coach every team, I would tell some teams to look at what your opponent's doing and try to take advantage. I would tell SK, look internally and try to work on what you're doing, and that's what they're doing. That's their game plan, so I'm excited.
I mean, this is a team that stuck together from last year. That's, a lot of teams did not. One of the few rosters that stayed as the same 5 as they had in Season 5. And I just don't think we've seen the level of improvement that I kind of expected. I mean, they've been together for a long time now. We're still kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Perfect analogy, because that's kind of what I was going to say. This team, I think it has taken a little bit longer than most people anticipated. We saw SK towards the end of the year, and obviously in the Worlds run, and they excited people. Coming here, I think that there was a level of like an adrenaline aspect, and now it's dropped a little bit, and reality has set in. But the other shoe, like, you know, sort of you jumped, you took a giant leap, and then reality came down. But you still deserve to kind of walk up a peg or two. And so I kind of wanted to read, I got a quote here from Zapman talking about what the team has been focusing on. And it's all about team fights, essentially. He says, our team's plan is, we're going forward, we're going to focus on the teamwork. Our target prioritization and acquisition there has not been the best. It still holds us back. We're going into every scrim, holding each other accountable during team fights and trying to build good habits. How's that, is what he says after that, because I asked him for a quote. But I love this, and I'll tell you why I love this. I've been here for 7 seasons, counting pre-season 1, and when you ask a player or a team, you know, what are you guys doing to get better? Well, you know, we're taking it one game at a time, we're trying to improve in this, that, and a third, and we're going to keep it together and try to build a family. This was a legitimate, bro, we have a game plan. We are looking at X's and O's. We know we're doing wrong. Team fight and target prioritization. To hear that type of specificity is very important, because you are actually working on something specific. And anybody that's ever kind of looking for that cross between like sports and esports, you've played sports. I'm sure a lot of people at home have played school sports. When you go to practice, you don't just scrim all day. You do drills. You have something that you're working on. And to hear that SK has something that they're working on narrow is very, very important for the improvement process. And these are the type of things that we need to see to get that other shoe to drop.
I think that's a great point, and one that really could help SK Gaming out quite a bit, but they're going to need it pretty quickly if they want to take down a hot LG team right now. I love that you brought up Zapman right away, because instantly I think of the Zapman Joshi lane.
Yeah.
That's one where, I mean, Joshi found the solo kill on Amelito in their set against United. You know that Joshi's capable of that, but Zap's been soloing people basically all year.
Yeah, Zap's been soloing people since Joshi was in a bassinet. So I think that Zapman's kind of going to have an upper hand there. I'm looking other places. I'm looking at support. Neil Ma was very exciting in the Worlds run and very exciting in the beginning of this year, but he's cooled off a little bit. I need that Neil Ma that we saw earlier to come on back, especially like you mentioned, kind of new blood in the pool. I need Neil Ma to stand up and go, no, it's me. I'm the support player, and I'm going to do it my way. If we don't see good Neil, it doesn't matter if Zapman goes 7-1 crushing Joshi. I think the bigger implications later in the team fights is that the support player needs to step it up.
Let's see what the rest of the casters think is going to happen in this set. Split down the middle. Another split down the middle one for one of your teams, Tom. How you feeling here?
SK all day, baby.
Have you picked against SK all year?
Nope.
Okay.
Listen, my first job in esports was SK Gaming. Shout out to Curly Chan. By the way, love the jerseys, love the unis, just putting it out there.
Why would you put that out there, Tom?
Because I want them.
Oh, okay. At least you're going to be honest about it. You know, we probably should have picked someone else to be the SK Gaming correspondent. You're so biased. I mean, I didn't realize that you had such a deep-seated connection. This is a big breaking story here on Esports Weekly, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. I promise
bias, you see bias. I see familiarity with the ins and outs of the organization.
Bias is what I just heard. Tom, thank you very much for joining us and talking about a team in which you have special interest that was not disclosed to me before we had picked correspondents for this season. Stay tuned here on Esports Weekly. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Esports Weekly. The Renegades started off the end of Phase 1 hot. That's a weird phrasing to say that they won the midseason invitational and continued their hot run into the beginning of Phase 2. To talk about it, we've got their correspondent, Anatoly, joining us here on Esports Weekly. Toly, I think a lot of people thought of Renegades as a team that didn't care too much about the regular season, was only going to turn it up when it came to the big events. They turned it up in the regular season against Splice last week. I feel like this is a team that realizes they have a potential to get to Worlds instantly and auto-qualify and get a good seed and really capitalize on how well they understand the meta right now.
They're really hot right now. They were challenged in phase number 1 where they ended at 5-4, but then going undefeated in the midseason. Very impressive out of them to still maintain that streak over Splice now. They're looking really solid, and the way they've been able to do it. Honestly, I'm looking back at that last game, Ryan, where Cherio was able to last hit the Titan.
Yep.
That was the MVP play because that should have definitely been to game 5. So I'm kind of curious as to what Renegades were truly seeing. I don't think the victory over Splice dictates how Renegades are going to perform in phase 2 quite yet.
So one of those games that would maybe a little bit closer than what it looked like on paper?
A little bit. Even though it was 3-1 score, I think that it could have easily still went to game number 5 after that last play.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that was a last hit situation, so I completely agree with you on that. Where do you see this team going? Because a lot of times when teams have set the meta, everyone else is now going to try and rush to defeat that meta.
Sure.
That's the cyclical nature of MOBAs. But when you're the team that already set the meta, are you really supposed to be the ones breaking your own strategy? Is that how it works?
Well, I mean, you know the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think it's up to other teams to really prove how to break Renegades. But that's not to say that Renegades are only relying on the Hunters middle, the mages for Funballer, even though he really likes those non-Hunters in that role. They have those other strategies in the back pocket, and I'm really curious to see what those strategies are throughout the weeks, because we're only entering now week number 4. There's still about, 9 more weeks of competitive play to see, and with Renegades still having, that many matches remaining, it's going to be a sight to see.
Yeah, there is a lot still left in the tank for basically every SPL team so far. And I guess that's a good point, though, is that if you aren't losing quite yet, why change it up? But
Sure.
if you were in Renegade's shoes, are you already practicing things that could be a little bit different, or are you just sticking to what you've already nearly perfected?
I mean, you got to stick to about 80% of your guns. You look at the update notes, the midseason changes. You're obviously preparing more about what the opponents are going to throw at you as opposed to you changing up your own style. So you got to be familiar with the Isis change, the Thor changes, and all the things of the likes. Still running the Musenkop middle for Dardas. That's not going to be changing anytime soon. And this week against Luminosity, it should be a relatively easy task ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that's been red hot against the best of the best so far, but LG's also looking pretty hot coming into this one. They may have cooled off by this point. This is a Friday game, and remember, LG has their game against SK on Thursday. I want to touch on Raffer because he has been such a critical part of this team, not only in leading them, obviously an in-game and out-of-game leader, but with the style of play that he's gone for. I think that the start that they've kind of concocted around where Raffer is going is really what's dictated a lot of this meta. Raffer has been a standout player for them all year.
Definitely. And he's also changed his style from the Raffer we've seen in the Energy days, where now he's more selfless as well, trying to kind of alleviate the pressure from Dardas in the mid lane. It's been working out really well between the Khepri that's been constantly getting banned away from Raffer if he hasn't selected his pick yet. That leaves more picks available for Nika to do whatever he wants as well. And his positioning and how he starts helps that mid lane pressure. The neutral camps always seem to go to Renegade's way as a result of that mid pressure. Darda's always playing the Musenkop or anything that can outpush his opponents, and then Raffer's present. The Horus and the Terra as well, outside of the Khepri and the Kumbhakarna, is what really gets them that mid control.
So what do you think is going to be the key matchup here up against Luminosity? Because LG's a team that you don't have a lot of film on quite yet. They've only played 2 sets with their current setup. They'll have a third to watch on Thursday. But is there a particular lane that you're looking for to try and exploit?
The exploiting lane is definitely going to be the solo lane. I think Nika is going to heavily outplay Xaylia just because of looking at the former LG tapes. In the 9 games that LG has played, it was Chalk and Jormungandr in 7 of those 9 games. So not much diversity from that role. If I'm Renegades, I'm looking at those tapes. I'm looking at kind of trying to dominate that solo lane matchup. But in terms of fireworks, I kind of am looking at the jungle role just to see how Lasper and Sherry are going to interact with one another.
I mean, Lasper went toe-to-toe with Cubo Fred in their set against Dignitas, so that should be a good one. All the casters leading Renegades' way, and I feel like totally it's hard to pick anyone but Renegades in any matchup they might be going into.
Yeah, you can include me into the voting right there. 5 for 5. I'm sure you as well probably voted for Renegades. So we're all 6 for 6. We're all in the same boat.
Yeah, I mean, Renegades haven't lost a set in a long time, it feels like, so you may as well try and lean into it. Where do you think this team could ultimately end up in the standings when it's all said and done in this phase 2?
I think Renegades are a top 4 team in terms of the regular phase online, or I guess offline portion now in Season 6. But in LAN, they're they're making it to the finals on LAN as long as they can continue to be the meta and the trendsetters.
Yeah, the fact that your record carries over from phase 1 certainly hampers any chances they have of being the top seed, but top 4 certainly seems doable if they continue to play at this level. Totally, thank you very much for joining us and talking about the Renegades. Splice, new look for them. Solar Patrol trying to slot in and look comfortable for this team. We'll sit down and talk with their correspondent Taco right on the other side of this break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. Splice did not get the revenge they were looking for against Renegades last week, but have a chance to step themselves up and get right the ship once more here in the next week to talk about their chances to do so. We've got Taco joining us once again, the Splice correspondent. Taco, I mean, Splice, I can't quite put my thumb on where I think they are, because they get really hot in phase 1 once they pick up Baskin and Scream and Ven, and everything's going really well for them. Now Baskin leaves Solar Patrol in, and they lose to Renegades, but you know there's still a lot of potential there. I just can't quite figure out where I want to put them in the overall power rankings.
It's some mild growing pains, I think, for this Splice roster, and they were very much anticipating that this would probably be a little bit of a bump in the road that they would encounter one way or the other, whether it was from adding Solo Patrol or even if they'd happened to keep Baskin on board. I still think that this team might have encountered some of their own fair share of difficulties, but for Solo Patrol, it's really just a confidence game, and this is kind of the same conversation that we had last week on Esports Weekly, but I still feel it as being very much relevant to this current situation for the team, because Solo Patrol, he's had a little bit of experience now at the highest level of play, sure, but this is only the beginning, really, and with so many different meta adjustments that are coming into play, Splice also being one of the teams that doesn't like to stick to the mold.
No, this is certainly a creative team. You never know exactly what they're going to do, except they're probably going to win most of their games. That's really the only constant for this Splice roster. I do have a proposition, however. Maybe if we start calling Solar Patrol SOT instead of SOT, new nickname for them. I mean, it's the same thing, but we just pronounce it a little bit differently. Maybe that can turn the tides.
I've been trying to give suggestions to Solar Patrol for that name change since I think even before last year.
I'm just saying SOT, not that bad.
So,
you know?
you want to give it a shot for this segment?
Yeah, SOT.
Okay, so SOT in the solo lane for Splice,
Okay.
It feels weird to say, man. I'm not gonna lie.
All right. Well, you know, I'm just trying. I'm spitballing here, seeing if I can help the boys out.
What about
but
suit?
No, it's
It's
not,
an extra O, but
Yeah, you got to go with the SOT that's down there on the lower thing.
maybe I just enunciate on my O's a little bit more.
Maybe you can give it a shot. I mean, talking about breaking this meta, they had a chance, I think, to just give another shot to beating what Renegades did to them at the Mid-Season Invitational, where Renegades are doing this unique start. Splice copy it in that set. A lot of teams have. It's not just Splice, but Renegades still end up on top. But Totally was saying from the Renegades perspective, that set was a little bit closer than it may have ended up looking after the fact of the 3-1.
And I have to agree with Tolly on that one. If it's not direct information from the Renegades themselves, I think that it was just kind of evident in the way that a lot of those team fights broke out. Sure, ultimately Renegades were able to pull out the W, but I definitely think Splice gave them a run for their money despite the set score line by the end of it. And one big issue that Renegades seemed to really have was trying to put a pinpoint onto Cyclone Spin, actually. I don't think it was necessarily a game that came down to the support play, although that's what really started it off. I just think that Splice ran out of steam a little bit halfway through, and it kind of just got confused with where Renegade's direction was shifting to, because Renegades, they don't necessarily have to play off of dual lane or off of solo lane exclusively. This is a team that's usually firing off on all cylinders, and I think for the most part, Smite is kind of in that same category, but the main issue that they have is with that addition of Solo Retrol and him still being so relatively new to the scene, he's kind of just struggling to always be there to pick up the ball.
So how does he match up against FineOK? Because their matchup is against Rival this week. FineOK has been probably the premier solo laner so far this year. How do you think that matchup's going to go for Splice?
I actually think this is one of the better matchups for Solo Retrol because FineOK is another really well-established member of the North American scene and also someone that SOT has had a lot of time to actually play against, although for the most part that was largely at a ranked level of play.
Sure.
It still helps out just a little bit to get some good insight into that God pool because I think Solo Retrol and FineOK are both really similar in the sense that they have very diverse God pools in comparison to a lot of the rest of the league. I think that you could ask them to play just about anything and they'd both be able to fulfill that role for their teams.
Two very flexible players, and who knows, you might end up with an Artemis versus Susano lane or
Artemis
something
versus
like that.
Uller.
Yeah, Artemis
That's what it'll
Uller.
be.
Yeah, that could certainly be it. I just feel like this is one of those matches where Splice, I mean, they've dropped to 6th seed now, so they've moved down in the rankings a little bit. Obviously, top 6 is still very impressive in this SPL with how competitive it is, but I feel like they're better than 6th seed. You know, I just feel like there's a little bit more there.
Well, I mean, it's not bad to be in 6th place either when you consider how competitive the SPL has been so far. But I do have to agree with you. I don't really feel for Splice to be in that 6th place and higher. I think that I could still see them realistically becoming a top 3 team. I think that this is just more so a transition period for them than anything else. And if anything, once the meta actually becomes a little bit more established, that's where I think we'll really start to see Splice rise because these guys, Roar especially, Kabam as well, I think, puts a lot of effort into trying to figure out these wacky strategies that on paper you think are absolutely ridiculous, but then you watch them actually put them into play and you're like, wow, how could we not have thought of this sooner?
Yeah, it's like Hercules support. Okay, dude, like whatever, if you say so, and then Aurora just wins you the game outright by himself, and you're like, oh yeah, maybe we should have kept this a little bit more seriously. They're in 6th right now at 6-5. Pittsburgh Knights are your current 3rd place team at 8-3, so a 2-game difference there, but they still have their set up against PK. Theoretically could get to top 3, just have a little bit of work to do in that meshing department, I think, for Splice. Taco, thank you very much for joining us and talking about the defending world champions. We've got the top seed Rival still to go over. John Finch will join us right on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. Team Rival is the undisputed #1 seed in the regular season play here in Season 6, but still, I think, have a little bit to prove after their mid-season invitational run. They've got a good test up against Splice this week. To talk about it, we've got John Finch, Rival correspondent, joining us here for the show. Finch, do you think that's a fair statement that I just made, that even though they're the #1 seed, they haven't lost since week #2, Rival still needs to go out and continue to beat the top teams?
I think so too, man. You got to go win when it matters the most, right, at MSI, and that was one thing that they could not do. They ran to that Armada stumbling block, and I would describe it as a collapse, if I have to be honest about the way that went. I mean, it was a little bit difficult to watch it sometimes because they didn't look like themselves at all, and what it looked like was a mental error that they kind of ran into. So I think that's what Rival is showing us here now, that they can be mentally tough and that they can't kind of overcome that stumble they had.
I do think that is a positive and a negative to have that stumble be a little bit more mental than gameplay oriented or anything like that, because you've learned that is your team is capable of having that happen to them, which is not a good thing. But also you can set up the stops and understand how to stop that thing from happening in the future.
Yeah, and I think that they talked a little bit about this on like social media and stuff, that they took that time after midseason invitational for everyone to take some time for themselves. They took a little bit of a break just from Smite. Everyone kind of recharged and came back in clearly refocused here based on how these first 3 weeks have have gone. They had a really tough start to. I think it was Dig and Knight that they played, and they came away from that 6-2, winning both of those sets. That's pretty impressive when you consider how strong those opponents are. So I think clearly they have refocused. We'll see if they can remain that same refocus, because this team's so good in the regular season that their aspirations at this point should be winning Worlds. Like, they're clearly dominant here in the regular season.
Completely agree with you. When you go 2-0 against Dignitas and Knights to start your phase, things are going okay
Yeah,
for
you're
you
looking
regardless
good.
of what happened as of late. Splice is one, though, that I think is still an unknown quantity to some degree. You still have Solar Patrol kind of being added into that mix. How do you think that this new-look Splice matches up against Rival?
It's really interesting. I think they do have one matchup problem here on this team, and I think it could possibly be in the long lane. Cyclone Spin, I think, just looks so good right now. There's very few hunters who I would put ahead of him, maybe Funballer, but, I mean, those two guys to me are right there near the top. And Arkle has had some struggles. I've seen him at some times where he steps a little bit too far forward and gets soloed in matchups where he should be ahead. Not to say he's a hindrance to this team, because they're insanely good, and you don't get that way if you have a hindrance on there.
Sure.
But there clearly is some cracks there in the arm, and I think one of those could be that matchup. I'm not sure if maybe they need maybe a little bit more attention over there from Twig, or just to prioritize what he gets in that matchup. But I watch that long lane to see how that set's going to go.
I think that's a good point to look at, and let's see what the rest of the casters feel. Split down the middle. This is the most contested picks we've had on an Esports Weekly yet.
Yeah.
A lot of split decisions.
Right.
So we'll leave it up to you, Finch. Where do you think this one's going to go?
I do want to remark on what you said. I think it's just we've got to the most competitive point yet in the SPL, probably in its history.
No doubt.
But in this matchup in particular, I am leaning towards Rival here in this one. I think it's up to Splice to show us that they can win. Right now, I favor FineOK in the Solar Patrol matchup pretty heavily.
Sure.
And I'm very interested in how that jungle matchup is going to be going as well. See how well Twig does.
I know it's going to be fun to watch, and that's the bottom line. Who cares about everything else? Finch, thank you very much for joining us here to talk about Team Rival. It's going to be a sweet week here in the SPL. If you couldn't tell by all these predictions, a lot of casters disagreeing on where these sets are going to go. As we've talked about extensively, Rival has been your top seed during Phase 1 very consistently here, continuing into Phase 2, beating second and third seeds so far already in this phase. I've talked a lot today about where, the kind of battles for the bottom so far. 7, 8, 9, 10 all play against one another this week. And it's going to be a big set for all of those. We kick it off Thursday with Obey versus SSG. That is the battle for 9th right now in my mind. LGSK is the battle for 7th. I mean, Thursday is going to be, look, is it the top end, Rival versus Dig or Dig versus PK or anything like that? No, it's not. But these are the games that we usually get really, really good matches that are close and back and forth and a blast to watch. Perfect Smite is not always entertaining Smite to watch for some people at home. It's like the defensive battle in football or the pitching duel in baseball. You have to really appreciate the minute details to appreciate that top-end play. These close matches between teams like SSG and Obey are usually just slugfests that are a ton of fun to watch. So make sure you tune in. And this is going to, I think, determine quite a bit about the rest of Phase 2. Who's going to be that number 9 team, and frankly, more importantly, potentially, who's number 10 and the worst team in the SPL at this current time. And then we've got our 7-8 matchup between LG and SK. SK finally someone challenging them for that best of the worst team title. See if they can hold on to it this time around. As we've kind of highlighted as well, the week after this is a bye week. We will still be having an Esports Weekly. It'll be a slightly different look, a bit of a special episode. So make sure you tune in next Wednesday for that here on mixer.com/SmiteGame. But make sure you watch all the games this week because there aren't any next week. No SCL, no SML, no SPL. Big bye week next week. So get your fill right now, Thursday, Friday, starting at 11 a.m. at mixer.com/SmiteGame. Thanks so much for watching. As always, you can get all your up-to-the-date SMITEPro news on @SmitePro on Twitter. You can always get in touch with me @Agro on Twitter. And we'll see you next week for our bye week episode. Until then, see you later.